Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Maybe after 2 years since we last had the National Semiconductor Hub Forum, which I was part of. I'd like to especially thank Dr. Naveed Shirvani for always providing us this amazing platform to get together and share our thoughts. A little bit about me. My name is Jawad. I moved to Saudi about 2 years ago, and I was fortunate to work with Dr. Naveed. I call myself one of the founding members of the National Semiconductor Hub. And then after that, I was with Revos, a GPU startup from Silicon Valley for a year that we sold to Meta. And just a couple of months ago, I joined Intel as the general manager for strategy and partnerships. I'd like to maybe draw a quick parallel between the key technologies that we have gone through. I know in the previous slides, multiple people have talked about kind of the evolution of technologies. The way I see it is, we saw electricity picking up, which enabled machines inside the house, in the industries, in the offices, and there was a time when people used to say, I have electricity in my village. And, you could have TVs, you could have radios, video recorders, and so on. Then as I was growing up, and I come, my father comes from a village in Pakistan. He used to take us sometimes over there. And I remember there was a time when there was no internet, but, growing up, probably when I was in 9th, 10th grade, we could have like 3G, 4G connectivity. Fast forward, the smartphones came along and high-speed internet, and now you go to the village. This is a small village, and people are on YouTube, Facebook, WhatsApp. People are truly connected. But if you look at these two technologies, it took probably decades for these technologies to pick up. Now, talking about AI, it's people say that they can't even put a strategy for the next 2 years because you don't know what's going to happen in 2 months. It's evolving fast, it's changing fast, and we have moved very quickly past the chat GPT and moving forward very quickly. If I look at where we are in terms of the AI trajectory, kind of starting from that and going into the semiconductors, so we have moved past the generative AI. The chat GPT moment happened a few years ago. And we are quickly going into what we are all calling agentic AI, right? Agentic AI is all about tasks, tasks automation, making the enterprises more efficient in terms of how you finish your tasks, right? And then the future, Jensen Huang now calls physical AI as the new frontier, humanoid robots, and so on and so forth. And then a big topic, especially in this part of the world and other emerging economies, is sovereign AI. As I was just thinking about where are semiconductors going today, and where the semiconductors will be going the most in the future, this was an interesting chart I came across by PwC. So the x-axis is actually the technology feasibility, and the y-axis here is the market potential. Now, there's technologies like spatial computing, nuclear science, and so on, where there is a lot of market potential. You can go to Mars. You can have data centers in space. All of that is great, but it's not ready yet. On the other hand, we have technologies like green software, brain-computer interface, which have huge feasibility, but they are not ready yet for prime time. So if we look at the chart, obviously advanced AI, humanoid robots, self-driving cars, and picking up quantum compute are few areas where PwC has rightly analyzed that that's where most of the semiconductors is going to go into. As I was thinking about this yesterday, in terms of what should we talk about, and I think Rajit pointed out about the the 5-layer AI stack. Jensen Huang said at Davos in his keynote that AI is a 5-layer cake. And if we look at this 5-layer cake and try to unpack it a little bit, from a Saudi standpoint, it might be very interesting. So the lowest layer on the cake is the power and energy, the likes of Saudi electricity, Aqua Power, so on. Saudi providing 30-40% cheaper energy than rest of the world is a huge opportunity for the power innovation. The next layer up is the chips and the hardware. This is why we are all here. If we think about it, in the last 2 years, there's a few things that we have seen. Dr. Naveed has taken the initiative to put together National Semiconductor Hub, which is we've seen so many startups, including the startup that I was with, Revos, landed in Saudi. Prior to that, Grok, Qualcomm, MemoryX now. We've seen a lot of these, the chip startups which are coming here. That's a lot of it on the R&D side, right? And then we know about Alat that's, looking to, work on the manufacturing side, working with Lenovo and few other players. We've had initial talks with them on some kind of advanced manufacturing in the kingdom, right? So very important layer, the chips and hardware, where there's huge opportunity for the kingdom. Moving one layer up, we go into the cloud and infrastructure. This is where a national champion like Humane has born, right? They're onto the mission to build 6 gigawatts plus of the capacity. Sadaya just announced 500 megawatts of Hexagon project, Data Vault. Our friend Rajit was here earlier. And obviously, there is a lot of opportunity here for serving the region with the capacity, right? Not just Saudi, but becoming a national, regional champion and serve the world. Moving up is the models. Now, one could think that you could stop at the cloud layer, but I think it's extremely important to own the whole stack all the way to the applications. Models, it's an important layer. That's where Sadaya had built Alam. That Alam is a large language model, 34 billion parameters, which is now part of Humane. And Humane is using that to build applications around it. And then finally, on the top of the layer is applications. As we know, there's a ton of startups in Silicon Valley around coding, around video generation, which are really changing how how we live lives and how the enterprise is going to be in the future. And 80 to 90% of the value of AI will eventually accrue in the application layer. So, I would love to see some unicorns come out of Saudi or this region, in AI, in that application space. All right, so we talk about semiconductors now. I know 2 years ago when we held the National Semiconductor Forum, I think Dr. Naveed, you said that semiconductors will be $1 trillion market by 2030. That was the forecast of IDC 2 years ago. IDC's new forecast is that we're going to hit the $1 trillion by 2028. Right, so you've fast forwarded that by 2 years, which is huge. What is driving that? Obviously, huge spend cycles by the data center guys. Buying a lot of GPUs, CPUs, and so on. Another big trend that Ahmed talked about is the edge AI and edge AI at scale. The whole concept of hybrid AI, where there's cloud, there's edge. Third is the whole verticalization of everything, right? And semiconductors also will see that, where if you're building LLMs for a specific technology, you're building ASICs, right, for particular technologies which are best at one thing. Right, so that's also another huge thing. The likes of Broadcom, Marvell, they're really benefiting from this ASIC business. And then finally, we're going into the physical AI, the robotics. All of this is driving the demand for semiconductors. $1 trillion to 2028, that's huge. Just looking at it from a global standpoint, the big orange on the right is US, which owns the bulk of the market share for semiconductors today. And On the top, the blue one is China, and China is the fastest growing in terms of semiconductors. So the market share is with US, the growth is with China, and then you see the bubbles over there. There is Taiwan, there is Korea, there is EMEA. So I think the question for us in this room is, with the theme of localization, how will this mission move forward, and how will Saudi have a dot on the map here? If I look at the Saudi semiconductor landscape, all right, let's be honest. Today, it's nothing, right? It's like close to nothing, less than 0.1%. We have seen a few big names in the kingdom, right? Grok came. They had a great exit. They were here. They built data centers in Tehran. Excellent story. Rivos, I was the general manager. We brought Rivos here. We were here for a year. We had huge interest from Humane, from Sadaya, and from investors to fund us in the next round, but also taken off the table. Then rebellions funded by Vaed is still here. Cerebrus, Samanova are fiddling around by coming here. They are definitely in some customer situations already. So what we do is really we move from chip design that NSH is doing. Then we have the manufacturing that hopefully Alat will enable. And then we go into deployment. And we hope that in the next few years, we move from nothing to a few $100 million to hopefully billions of dollars localized in the Saudi market. I'll spend a few quick slides on Intel and then close it at that. At Intel, the company is changing quickly after Liputan took over, and he's really converging the strategy, right? He is prioritizing what's important. So for Intel right now, there's three verticals really. We are the market share leader in the PCs, thanks to our friends Lenovo. Giovanni is here, and amongst others, and then. We are going into something called AI PCs, which is a big thing. So we are designing chips for AI PCs. Number two is edge AI solutions. We do significant business in the edge. It's very fragmented, and we are figuring out our Saudi strategy to go deep into the edge AI market. And then third is cloud and data center. We sell our Xeon line of CPUs, which are highest performing data center CPUs, and as we think about this, we are thinking about our AI strategy. We are thinking about what type of accelerators make more sense, and what type of software we need around those. And then finally, I think the biggest advantage for Intel is that we are an IDM, which means that we design our chips and we have the capability to manufacture our chips. So you have probably heard of Intel 18A Fab, which is our 1.8 nanometer facility. We announced our Panther Lake series of products at CES, which is designed in US, which is manufactured in US. So it's a huge American story, which is why I think it's also becoming very successful. So a quick look at what goes inside the AI PC chip. The AI PC chip is a combination of multiple CPU cores, multiple GPU cores, and an NPU. As we go into agentic AI, a lot of the task handling and the decision making is done within the CPU layer before passing it on to the accelerators. So in a hybrid AI capacity, this is huge to architect a chip which can do agentic AI using CPUs, and it can use GPUs for graphics, for speech improvements, on device, and so on and so forth, and NPU obviously for low power applications. We are very much in the camp where we're thinking the future is hybrid, and we are designing our solutions so that our solutions can sit both on the cloud as well as on the client side, whether that's a PC or an edge device. We think about 33% plus of the tasks don't need to go to the cloud. They can just simply be handled with the chips that we are building, on the device. And so that's a huge improvement in latency. huge privacy improvement, and it's a huge offload for the clouds and those billions and zillions of tokens, right? So let's take 33% off the cloud, bring it back to the device. All right, so quickly on the edge side, we are engaged in a variety of verticals. For Saudi, I believe that oil and gas is extremely important for us. Manufacturing is extremely important for us. Sports and entertainment is extremely important for us. Smart infrastructure, including smart stadiums for 2034 World Cup. Think of Expo coming up, all the giga projects. So there's huge edge deployment. Think of sensors, think of edge boxes, drones, robots. We're going to go deep into all of that. We're looking for strong local go-to-market partners, system integrators, ISVs. And a quick word on the data center side, as I mentioned already. So it's a Xeon 6 line of products, which is already pretty good. And as we revamp our accelerator line, which today is Gaudi, but we're thinking of partnerships as well as where we have a new chip in the roadmap coming later this year to fix the AI roadmap as well. So in terms of Saudi, as I joined as the general manager for strategy and partnerships, I think there is three things that we need to look at. Number one, we are going to focus a lot on training, workshops. We're already working with the likes of Sadaya, with Ministry of IT, and few other key players to upskill the Saudi workforce. That's going to be on Intel products, but also generally on AI. So that's one big focus. Secondly, as we are looking to potentially have an RHQ here, and if we do so, we want to hire a significant amount of a R&D team, and we want to localize, we want to co-build and co-develop, with our customers, with our partners, and in that we feel our IP will be localized and Saudi will benefit from owning that. A holy grail would be that if we build a kingdom CPU, when I was at NSH, we floated this idea around that the kingdom should build at least a CPU, because that's the first step in going in the direction of semiconductor sovereignty. And then last but not the least is obviously our go-to-market efforts. We plan to land and engage large marquee customers like Humane, Sadaya, DataVolt, and we're engaged with all of those. And of course, Lenovo, we want to do a lot more. And I think that sums up my my talk for the day. Thanks a lot for being here, and thank you for listening to me.